Hello, everyone. My name is May Elliott, and I'm the Marketing Assistant at NewCloud Networks. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar, Why Office 365 Backup is Essential for Remote Workers, brought to you by NewCloud Networks and Veeam. Today, you're going to hear from myself as well as Michael Deemer, a Veeam Solutions Engineer. If at any time during the webinar you have a question, please use the question feature on your screen, and all questions will be addressed at the end. So without further ado, I will go ahead and dive in. So we've got a great agenda for today. First, we're going to level set with what we're currently seeing in the market and take a look at some growth numbers. Then we're going to dive straight into the reasons why an Office 365 backup is so important. And then we'll look at the shared responsibility model. What is your responsibility when it comes to protecting your Office 365 data? We'll also be doing a deep dive into the retention policies that come out of the box in Office 365. And from there, we'll take a look at how Veeam addresses Office 365 data protection and show how it works with a demo. And then we'll wrap it up with a quick overview of NewCloud Networks and a Q&A. Now I will go ahead and turn it over to Michael to walk you through why Office 365 backup is essential to your mobile workforce.
Well, thank you very much, May. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Deemer, Systems Engineer here for Veeam Software, and I'll be the one kind of taking you through a little bit of light PowerPoint, and then we'll actually get into the actual demo of what it actually looks like today. So if you could for me, May, could you actually move the slide forward one for me? Thank you.
Yes, 1 second.
Yeah, no worries. Perfect. All right, so the very first thing I really kind of want to start to talk about is going to be, the remote workforce and the increased adoption of O365 kind of in general, right? So over the years, we've had about 258 million O365 users. Now, what's even crazier about this statistic is Office 365 is honestly getting about 12 million seats of Teams added about a week, right? So I don't know many other software as a solution companies that are adding about 12 million seats a week, which ultimately come out to about 44 million active Teams users. This is a very strong adoption. This isn't going to be going anywhere anytime soon. O365 just in general is going to only build with kind of the environment that we live in, especially with everything kind of going on in the world. The software as a solution services are really going to start to shine more and more, especially with the fact that a lot of people are stepping away from their on-premise physical servers to go to the more software as a solution-based or cloud-based solution. So that really leads me into the remote work, right? Or why remote workers are at risk, really. So now let's kind of step this back, right? There's a couple different things why remote workers are at risk. Well, the biggest one is the remote workers are at risk because, they're not on their, VPNs. They're not necessarily on a corporate network anymore. They're at their home offices, right? So they're more either in their home offices or maybe even a public Wi-Fi space, working out of maybe WeWork spaces, things like that. And that's where it's really kind of could be detrimental depending on how we set certain things up. Now, the reason that having remote devices is very something that a lot of people are starting to lean more towards because of everything going on is because you're accessing more shared data. You're also producing a lot more data, and that's really one of the main keys. Is normally on a corporate network from end to end everything's encrypted. Now, really the next biggest thing is security patches. And maybe not all users and all remote devices may be eligible for those updates. Maybe it's held by the corporate policy, or maybe the domain controller is the only one that can allow that remote service to go out, which would need like a VPN so it connects, and then it can go out and connect to those security patches. And a lot of times, and I'm sometimes even in this boat where maybe a big security patch comes out, like Microsoft 1909, for instance. And maybe you just didn't do it for a week, right? And then, you just it keeps getting pushed to the back burner until, something bad happens. So making sure that we're up to date on security patches, I think is very, very great and very common. I feel like why a lot of people are at risk. Now, home routers, I kind of talked about this a little bit. Again, you're using your ISP, your internet service provider's hardware, probably for the most part. Unless they're more of an advanced user or they just don't want to pay those fees anymore. So they're used to more of those low ends, not even, you could consider some of them firewalls, and I'm putting quotation marks around firewalls. They do have a little bit of OS hardening to them, but realistically, the modem routers that you guys are getting from most of your ISPs aren't true enterprise-grade firewalls. So that's, again, another reason why that your home network, the ones that the network that you're working from, could potentially be, excluded one way or another. And then public Wi-Fi. This, to be brutally honest, is one of the biggest things, and this is like a breeding ground for attacks. And this has been a common attack vector for a long time. When you go out and connect to a network, you're really allowing a lot of things to potentially get in there that really shouldn't. All right, so let's kind of go over these 6 reasons why O365 and why you need to back it up. So there is a couple here, and we'll kind of work from left to right. The biggest one is accidental deletion. I think I find this and the next 4 really on the same kind of page. You see them a lot. So accidental deletion, think of Sally from HR or maybe Devin from accounting. Hey, they lost something, that they need to return it. They need to make sure that they can get that data back. But let's just pretend Devin or Sally from HR, they didn't understand that maybe, or they didn't really realize that they deleted a piece of data that they needed, and then time goes on. And this kind of leads me into retention policies and confusing gaps. So when you kind of pair accidental deletion with retention policies and confusing O365 gaps where, hey, you think, hey, I'm protected, I'll just go reach out to the IT department, they'll send me that email back. But let's just pretend it's been longer than 30 days, right? Well, after 30 days, and I'll kind of get this into some of these other slides, where Office 365 isn't protecting you. You really only have about 30 days that they're protecting your full-blown inbox with. Well, inbox is a little bit different. I'll kind of give that a little later. But really 30 days is really the max around most things. And then what next kind of steps into is internal security threats and external security threats. This could be anything from malicious insiders, maybe a departing admin or an employee trying to potentially hide evidence. Maybe you have certain documentation that is definitely needed or required and you don't have a backup of it and it's deleted and it's gone now, or all the way down to something even just as scary, ransomware, malicious insider, Trojan horses, and rogue applications are also really going to be kind of all in that security zone where making sure that you guys have a copy and have it backed up is going to be mission critical to your overall goal to being able to get that point in time back and getting your data set back to up in operational terms. Now, this also leads me into compliancy and legal compliance. Maybe you're HIPAA, DOD, DOJ, kind of that kind of thing, or you have any type of compliancy that you have to, manage and really be able to talk to. If you had like an auditor come in and maybe you need to keep all of your data for 5 years and you thought O365 was doing that, your auditor comes in and gives you a huge fine. This is something that I've seen. I was an MSP admin for a long time, and I've seen this when people didn't understand what was really going on the back end. And again, that's kind of the confusion gaps and those retention policy gaps that people think that they have and they don't. Definitely last but not least is managing hybrid and migration. So it doesn't matter if you're full-blown on-prem, you're hybrid, or you're fully in the cloud. Veeam Office 365 is going to be able to help you out, even migrate that data if really needed. So how often does this really happen? Now, how often does accidental deletion happen? So for instance, accidental deletion, 37%. That's a huge percentage of what's actually happening. So user error, accidental deletion. Next at 18%, this is going to be your security threats, anything from malicious insiders, ransomware, malware, Trojan horses, that kind of thing where it's actually attacking those particular databases. That's 18%, very, very high. And then next to that at 19% is retention gaps, thinking that, hey, I was covered and something was protected, but ultimately it really wasn't because it was never either set up right or you never had a solution to back it up. 20% is do not use or none, and then 6% of other. Now, 76 of businesses are really left unprotected. And this is really crazy to me. And I'm not going to read through all of these. I'm probably going to only read through a couple of them. But I just want to really tell you guys that it's very, very crazy to have your business, your daily applications, your daily data that you guys use on a daily basis not be protected. And kind of imagine you did all this work maybe in SharePoint or OneDrive or Teams, and you're creating it for your entire company. All of a sudden, malware comes in and wipes you out, right? And guess what? You can't retrieve that data because you don't have a backup of it. Now, at 19%, there is 19% of partners or tenants are using the native tools to back up. Now, 57%, we do not even back up Office 365 data, so they don't even try. 2% are manually copying the data from either a data center or another cloud. But here's the real key here is it says manual. With Veeam, there's no manual work. It's all set it, forget it, and let it do its thing. And then at 10%, and which I think we need to bump this number up quite a bit, is we are using Veeam Backup for Office 365 to protect the data. And the last 5, 3, and 4% are either using other third-party solutions, software as a service solutions, or completely running a standalone cloud product of their own. All right, so let's actually kind of go over what it looks like and why we need to protect your O365 data. Now, I've kind of talked to this a little bit, but I really want to kind of show this out. Is most people have this particular perception, right? So, hey, the infrastructure, that's obviously, of course, Microsoft. They need to own the infrastructure, and they also need to own the data. Now, this is actually a little skewed from reality. Where reality really comes into play, guess what? It's your data. Microsoft is responsible for infrastructure wholeheartedly. However, the customer is ultimately responsible for their data. Their data, their problem, they need to manage it. And I think that's what really happens is having that kind of mindset of, oh, hey, it's software as a solution. I got rid of my on-prem cloud or my on-prem server, and I'm going fully, hybrid or fully maybe software as a solution based. And they just ultimately think that they don't have to back that data up and they don't have to be necessarily responsible for it. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And this is where the Office 365 shared responsibility model really comes into play here. So let's kind of just go over some primary responsibilities, right? So primary responsibilities for Office 365, making sure the uptime of the O365 cloud service is always available. So making sure wherever you are in the world, you're able to log into that particular server. And there's a lot of other things that go into the infrastructure, but making sure that you can log into URLs and all the other security certificates that go on along with that. And then what is your responsibility? Your responsibility is access and control of your data residing in O365. So making sure that you're limiting your access, limiting your control of who can do what inside your organization is going to be very critical. Now, moving on here to supporting technology. Now, supporting technology, at least for Microsoft's responsibility, they're going to do DC to DC geo redundancy. So whether they have an availability zone outage, they're going to make sure that your data is available in another zone, able to be read and write. Now, on your side, a copy of your data stored in a different location. Why is this so mission critical? And why is this your responsibility? Because at the end of the day, it's your data, and making sure that you have a different copy or a copy of your data in a different location outside of that redundancy is going to be really mission critical to the overlining goal of what you're trying to accomplish. And again, this is making sure that you have a secondary spot to receive that data just in case something hits the fan, right? Now, something else that I want to talk about is some of the other supporting technology. For instance, like recycle bin. They're not going to give you very long time in this recycle bin. So I'm just going to make this short and sweet. It's going to be 30 days, and I'll kind of show you that here in a couple other slides. But again, you're really not going to be able to do that. And then being able to do a full restore of your data is going to be really, again, something of one of your responsibilities, just in case something happens, you can be able to pull back from. Now, security, this actually kind of goes into regulatory, so I'm going to kind of do both of these at the same time. So infrastructure at the physical level on the Microsoft Office 365 side is, their data centers, making sure that you just can't walk up to a Microsoft O365 data center and say, hey, I would like Sally's email from last week. They're going to tell you to kick rocks and pound sand. They're not going to allow you in. Same thing with logical security, right? Think of logical security as firewall, switches, the OS layers, really making sure that that particular side is locked down. And then going into like the app level security, this is going to be like MFA, making sure that it's a multi-factored authentication, making sure that you're supposed to be there, credentials match, all that kind of good stuff. And moving into regulatory, still in the O365 side, is going to be data privacy, regulation controls, industry certifications. So a lot of these big certifications, most companies, or maybe you have a rack space in a data center, potentially they're not going to have all those particular industry certifications, so you don't have to worry about those. But what you do have to worry about is all the stuff on your responsibility list, right? So accidental deletion, malicious insiders, and employee retaliation. I can't tell you how many times I've seen something like this, or evidence tampering, just because they don't want to get caught. They don't want to have any extra X, Y, and Z there. This is something that are also there. Same thing with malware, hackers, rogue apps, rogue agents, that kind of thing getting into your environment. And then at the least is, the role of the data is you, right? So you have to answer to all of your corporate and industry regulations. So make sure that you can pass auditors, right? Demands for internal legal and compliancy officers. Again, just making sure that we can, give them a green check box, and you don't have to make their admin or your admin life very miserable by now. Once you do fail, either getting hit with a fine and kind of get like a fix-it ticket kind of a deal, or, be able to get hit with a fine and have to go buy software to fix it. So making sure that you can pass those previously is going to be really good. All right. So let's actually go here to the next one. Let's see. Oh, there it goes. All right. So Office 365 shared responsibility model. I kind of already went over this, but again, just very high level. Limit the access of the control of data. So without the backup for all 365, what are we going to be doing? We're going to limit the access and control of your data. We're going to do regulatory exposure, security vulnerabilities, and retention policy gaps and dangers that kind of go along with data loss and everything else like that. So without a backup, you're really leaving yourself open and really wide open to stuff like this. And that's really the main key here. Now, this is what it looks like normally. So this is what it looks like through Office 365 when they're basically keeping your data. Now, what you're going to notice is your inbox or folder data is going to be honestly the longest. So that's going to be about 1 to 2 years, depending on how it moves and all that kind of good stuff. But 2 years is technically their default. Now, deleted items, SharePoint items, OneDrive items, employee leaves company, all this kind of stuff, it's 1 month. You have 30 days. And then that last one, employee leaves the company, that could be as little as 1 day. It says 1 month, but honestly, it really depends how your admin goes about purging that particular account. They rip off that license without doing like a PST file or having a backup of it. Well, guess what? You completely lost that data. It is completely gone. And I can't tell you the amount of times when I was an MSP admin prior to Veeam, how many times I've seen that happen. It was almost on a weekly basis where an admin didn't understand what was going on. A ticket went into help desk, and there it went. And then all the data was gone. Now, what does it look like when we actually back up O365 with Veeam? And that is going to be different. Actually, let me go back one slide here. So there one little tidbit. What is the average length of data compromise? So the average data compromise length is about 140 days. So let's just pretend Sally or John from HR, they deleted something. They might just not need that piece of data for up to as long as like 140 days is usually the time frame when something is needed, and they really start to remember, hey, I might have had that piece of data. Well, at that point, honestly, it's too late. It's already been deleted because your default settings are really only between 30 and 90 days. And that 90 days is if you really set it up and were actually security minded when you set up O365. That's not going to be a default at 90. That's going to be an extra layer that you set up. So let's actually kind of look at what it looks like when we back it up with Veeam and NewCloud as a repository. We can keep the data for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, or forever. Realistically, as long as you really want the data, we can keep it, we can push it, we can manipulate that data all the way to the repository of choice. In this particular case, having it at the data center NewCloud is really going to be able to be that really big benefit, and having that retention policy and making sure that we can get back to that point in time state is going to be mission critical. All right, so let's talk about why the number one backup and recovery for Office 365 is Veeam backup and replication, or for Office 365. So let's kind of go over it. So I'm not going to drill too much into this because I think that we've really covered a lot of this, but I do want to kind of show you stuff for Exchange, OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint, and really a lot of different things that we can securely do and back up to any location, including on-premise or even a cost-effective cloud storage, kind of like NewCloud. So if you wanted to go back on-prem, you definitely could. If you want to go to a cost-effective cloud storage, you definitely could with NewCloud. Now, this is going to be able to, protect your data from accidental deletion, kind of the stuff we talked about, security threats, and retention policy gaps. As long as you have a backup of your data, there's no worries for those particular things. And then quick restore. So again, Sally or John from HR, right? They deleted something, and you need to be able to make sure that it goes back to that particular user in a very, very fast, formal fashion. We can do quick restores of individual files and items. So if Sally just lost that one piece of mail, we don't have to go out and redo her entire mailbox. We can just go back to that piece of mail and then send it back to her. And then we can also meet the legal and requirement or compliance requirements, which is going to make your internal IT team very happy, where they don't want to get drilled from the auditors and they have to now jump through all these hoops to make sure that they are now back off the naughty list per se. So that's really going to be a lot of the good things that kind of come out with why we back up Office 365, and we're really eliminating a lot of that risk in losing the access to Office 365. All right, so let's kind of go over how it works. So I'm going to do a very high level of how it works right before I actually do a demo. So let's actually kind of look at this on the left side here only. So you have your O365, you have your Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and SharePoint also honestly includes Teams. There's a Teams, you just can't see it. They're really SharePoint sites underneath the hood. A little nerdy fact. Okay, so Office 365, at least for Veeam, is going to be, here's your Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365. And I'll kind of go over to this, all the resources, restores, all that kind of stuff in the demo. But again, I'm just going to get you guys used to it. Then if you guys were fully up here, or if you're down here, whether you were hybrid, so if you were a mix of Exchange here, but you had SharePoint, OneDrive up here, or if you're fully on-prem, we could also be backing this up. Now, what does it look like? We can go to a couple different things here. We can go to object storage, so Amazon, S3 compatible, Microsoft Azure Blob, IBM Cloud, NewCloud, or if we wanted to, we could go down to even on-premise storage. So if you wanted to land maybe back on a file server, by all means, we could definitely do so. And now, what does it look like to restore? Every single for SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and Exchange, they're all going to have their own Explorer, and they're all going to be able to do kind of the same thing to a degree, and I'm going to show you those out here. They're all going to be able to restore the data. They're all going to be able to send, save, and export the data, and we can even have a self-service restore option via the service provider. So if you use NewCloud, for instance, they could give you a self-service provider or a self-service restore portal, so that way you don't have to go in and make a ticket. You can just go in, browse for it yourself, go out, and it's so easy to restore. It's literally left click and restore and pointing back to where you want to go. And I'll show you that here on the demo here today. Now, let's kind of just look at this at a very high level. Here's 25 options for Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 here. So these are really breaking down how we do resource. For Exchange on the top left, SharePoint bottom left, OneDrive, and then Teams is on here as well. But it's just not on this particular page. But as you see here, we can do a whole bunch of different things. We can make PST files. We can make message files. We can send and make different SharePoint sites, saving to different SharePoint sites as a zip. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff that we can really do here. All right, so this really kind of leads me back into the demo here. So what at this particular time, I'm just going to actually, if May, you could give me presenter rights, I will start share out my screen. So let's do this. Boom. And let me make sure you guys can see it.
Yep, I can see it on my end too.
Perfect. I appreciate that, man. All right, so this is what Veeam backup for Office 365 looks like. Now, let's take a small step back here. So this is Office 365, of course. Now, the reason I'm going to take a step back is I kind of want to go over, like, where does it live, and resources. So this is a Windows Box 2008 R2 SP1 or above. This particular Windows box is actually a 2016. I think, actually, I take that back. I think this VM is actually a 2019 OS. Anyway, so the newer flavor of Windows, the better off you are. But again, we can go all the way back to 2008 R2 SP1 or above. Now, the amount of resources, we're not a resource pig by any stretch of the form of the imagination. This is really going to be coming into play with 4 cores and 8 gigs of RAM and a 500 meg install file. Is going to get you this pretty user interface that you see here today. Now, when setting up this pretty user interface, we're going to need to do a couple different things. And the very first thing I'm going to really start at is going to be the backup infrastructure side. All right, so once we have the backup infrastructure here, we have the ISO, we downloaded it from Veeam.com, and you got your license key, all right, you're going to be able to start to carve off some of this backup infrastructure. And the very first thing I really want to talk about is a proxy. So when you hear proxy and you hear Veeam, this is the guy that's going to be doing, actually, let's go, yeah. All right, there it goes. All right, so this is going to be the guy that's going to be doing a lot of the processing. Anytime your data is moving from one to another, this is your guy. This is your guy when doing backup. So he wears multiple different hats. And what this is really allowing you to see is we're going to be batching 64 threads consecutively. Now, you may be asking, well, what is 64 threads really boiled down to? And this really boils down to having 64 threads is really, if you think of OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, or Exchange across the whole board, and we thought more granularly on the inbox side, right? So think of that as, hey, I have a granular inbox item, and every item that's single, so every piece of mail is technically a thread. We're going to be batching 64 threads consecutively there. And if you did, you could throttle your traffic if needed to here as well. Now, that's going to be kind of the more muscle behind Veeam. And then we have a whole bunch of different repositories, anywhere from an on-prem repository to an object storage repository, or even like a NewCloud. So you'd see like NewCloud up here. This would be what would be considered an object storage repository. And here's the cool thing with either one of these guys, Azure, AWS, NewCloud, or even an on-prem repository, is we can write directly to these particular repositories. We don't have to send like a copy job or anything like that. It's honestly point and shoot to the repository that you want. So for instance, you have, you instead of it saying AWS, it said NewCloud, and you want to land directly in the NewCloud data center, you definitely could. Or if you wanted to land right back on-prem, you definitely could there as well. Whole bunch of cool stuff. There's a whole bunch of repositories here. So if you wanted to add a repository, we'll just say test, and we'll kind of go through this. So we have S3 compatible, Amazon S3, Microsoft Azure Blob, and IBM Cloud Storage. And then your S3 compatible is honestly going to be wherever you add in your new cloud organization. Now, moving up to organization. This is going to be a very high level, but this is where we start to add in the tenant itself. So this is a tenant, this is a tenant, and this is a tenant, right? So this Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365 is built for multi-tenancy. So if you had maybe different companies, maybe you had a sister company, and you wanted everything to be managed into one, you definitely could. This could be your single pane of glass for all of O365. Now, what does it look like to add an organization in? So adding an organization in, or yourself or your tenant, this is going to be very easy. This is really just picking out the deployment and what we're trying to capture. For this instance, we're backing up Office 365, but if we wanted to, it could be hybrid or fully on-premise. Really kind of depends. Again, really doesn't matter where you are in this step, right? So if you're still fully on-prem, hey, I'm hybrid, I have maybe Exchange in the cloud and SharePoint online. You can really make that kind of factor in that change just depending where you are. But if you're fully O365, we're just going to be picking out the services that we want to protect. So if we want to protect Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams, we're just going to be picking out the basically sets of data that we want to capture. Now from here, this is going to allow for modern authentication. There is basic authentication and then modern authentication. I'm always going to lean towards the more MFA approach, the modern authentication approach. Really, this is going to be making sure that, we're really setting this up for best practices. It's not going to call you or send an email or send a text every time a backup job kicks off. This is really for making sure that when we connect to the tenant itself, it's a secure connection rather than your just basic username and password here. All right, now some of the information that we're going to need is application ID, secret, and certificate. After we get this, basically the tenant would be added in. We'll do next, finish, and it would be installed. Now up here, this is what it looks like to actually make a job. So this is the name of the job. So Office 365 going to Azure. In this particular case, there's two different ways that we can do this. Now, we can back up the entire organization, and this truly means OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, or Exchange. Or, if we wanted to, we can make this more granular, all the way down to certain users, groups, sites, teams, organizations, or organizations in whole. So again, it just kind of depends. So if you just wanted one job to back it all up, you could. Or if you wanted to get very granular and say maybe you have certain users that need to be backed up on a different level, same thing with group sites, teams, or organizations. For instance, maybe you had like some C-level employees that maybe need their email backed up more than, let's just say, maybe like accounting or the janitor or somebody on a lower ranking field. You're able to make that corresponding adjustment based on users, groups, sites, organizations, or teams. Now, these are going to be all the things that we need to or want to exclude. I wouldn't say need. This is where if you had admin accounts, you had anything that you basically just didn't want to have backed up, this is where you would add that in. Last but definitely not least is choosing the backup proxy. The backup proxy is the guy that's, again, doing the muscle for the Office 365. And then this particular repository is actually landing in Azure. But again, if you wanted to, you could change that repository, especially if you had like NewCloud, or if you want to land back on-prem or a different object storage, you definitely could. Now, this is going to be how often the job runs. So this job is going to run automatically. This job is running 9 p.m. every day. You can have it on certain days of the week if you want, or you can even make this more periodic. So depending on how granular you want to get, you can go from anywhere from 5 minutes to every 8 hours, really just depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Now, we do have a retry process. This retry process really is going to come down and boil down to 3 times with 10 minutes in between, severing the job on the third attempt. Now, you could change this to 6, you could change it to 30, 50, whatever that may be, but default is 3 times 10 minutes in between. And really what this is doing is making sure, let's just say it couldn't reach a SharePoint site, it couldn't reach an Exchange user for whatever reason. It's gonna try 3 times 10 minutes in between, and then sever that job and actually send you a report on actually why we couldn't do that. Cool. So that's really making the backup job and all that kind of good stuff. Now let's look at what it looks like to do a restore. Now a restore is going to be quite different, but I think it's going to be very, very easy. And I think this is probably one of the favorite parts that I have around O365 is these explorers. So if you see here, we have 2 for Exchange, we have 2 for SharePoint, 2 for OneDrive, and 2 for Teams. Now, as you notice here, you're going to see these point-in-time states. So basically the last time it was backed up is backed up at 9:01, all these days, right? And then on these, this is a point-in-time state. So if you wanted to, this is honestly the favorite way I like to do it. So if you wanted to, you could fail back to certain points in time. So let's just call it the 11th. You could fail back to then. And then we can show some e-discovery settings, show what has been deleted by the users and or been modified by the users. And we'll let this finish. Now, there's going to be a little error that pops up. This is truly not an error. This is saying, hey, right now we're browsing metadata, and because if we were pulling this every time from Azure, it would be a huge bill. So we have this pointing back to a metadata cache, so that way we can browse it. Now, what does it look like to get some of this data back? So you have your advanced find at the top. You have show changed items, compare with production. You can export, you can restore, you can add, you can remove, all the kind of good stuff up here. Think of advanced find, though, as e-discovery, but on demand. So instead of going to office365.com and running a report, hoping you got the right parameters in line, fingers crossed, and you get it back and it was the wrong day. You didn't get the right data set. This is honestly just scanning the backups, making sure that we can go back and granularly get that piece of data. So let's actually get down here. Let's look at John Snow. Let's see what John Snow has. So this is all the data sets that we capture. Anything from archive, calendar, conversation history, contacts, deleted items, permanently deleted items. And let's actually look at the inbox here. So let's actually make sure that this guy has any data. Oh, he does. Good, good. All right. So what this is really doing is this is going to be loading in the inbox. Now, what this is going to allow us to do is actually open and preview this piece of data. So if this isn't, like, let's just say this was John Snow, right? So John Snow called up, he's in accounting, and he needs to restore some of this data. Well, that looks like that's not the right piece of data. We need to come here and actually validate this as a piece of granular data that we need. So let's actually go back to this one. I like this one. All right, so this is the piece of granular data that we need. We're going to validate it. Cool, this looks right. John said that looks right. And now we need to do a restore. So we can restore it right back to Jon Snow. Or maybe if this was a shared email box, we can restore this back to multiple different users. Really kind of depends what we're trying to do here. Now, we can also export to the desktop, export as a TXT file, save to the desktop, and save as a message file. Now, we can also send it back. But Mike, you already said that we could restore it. What's the difference between send and restore? Well, restoring it puts it back in chronological order, where sending it puts it back at the top of the email box. I think this way is just a little more end user friendly, where this is going to be having the end users potentially go back in their email box, potentially quite a ways. Yes, of course, they can just go to unread and find it that way. But again, just really kind of depends on their level of skill and what they're comfortable with. So that's Office 365 kind of in a nutshell. Now I'm going to show out one more because honestly, they're all about the same. I'm going to show out, let's do SharePoint. So let's do a SharePoint site. I'm going to just leave it at this, and then we'll let this proceed. Again, we're going to get that error just saying, hey, we're browsing metadata. It's going to take a second here. Once that says perfect, that was a little basically saying, hey, you're browsing metadata right now. No worries. I understand that. And let's actually look at, let's see, maybe real estate. Let's look at some real estate SharePoint sites. So we can see in here, we can have their sub-sites. Let's see if there's any sub-sites. Maybe there's some content in here. Let's see if they have any documents. Do they have any templates? Site pages. Oh, cool. I got a site page. Cool. So again, advanced find at the top, e-discovery, send library, save library, or restore. Now, if we needed to, again, we can open and preview this data. I'm not going to open it probably because it's in like Word or something. Let's just see what it's in. Yeah, it's probably in Word. Oh yeah, it's APX. So yes, so I don't really want to actually open it, but you can do the same thing that you just did and exchange and preview the data, making sure that it's actually the data that you want. You can view the history on it. You can restore the document. You can keep it or overwrite it. Save it, save as a file, save as zip. You can send it back, right? That's awesome. And then what I really like the best is the properties. There's a lot of detailed information that you get right here from this page. You can see inherited permissions. When's the last time it was modified? Who modified it, right? And when was it created? So maybe if you had to go back to a certain version, you had to go, because you can see here, this is just version 1.0. So you can see that very clearly that there's not another version of this. Well, let's just pretend this site page had 10 or 12 versions. There was a lot of hands in the cookie jar, a lot of people making updates and a lot of changes. This is where this versioning and who edited it last, is it open, that kind of thing is really going to be mission critical for the overlying fit and function for Office 365. All right, so that kind of is Office 365 in a nutshell. I'm going to actually pass this back over to our Platinum VCSP partner, May, and she's going to be able to walk us through the rest. I'm glad everybody was able to kind of hear me spiel for a little bit, and I hope everybody got a lot out of that demo, so I appreciate everybody for hanging in there.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Here we go. All right. Cool. Awesome. Well, I just want to take a step back quickly and give you some context of who NewCloud is for those of you who might be unfamiliar with us. So we're a cloud services provider that's been in business since 1988. Our background is in networking, and we've evolved several times over the years to adjust our offerings according to the changes in technology. And so as such, we've amassed over 1,000 customers in the US and in Europe. And we're, like Michael said, we are platinum level partners with Veeam, and we were actually one of the first partners to launch Cloud Connect with Veeam. So we built a reputation for quality within our industry, and our SLA and customer satisfaction rating do a very good job of exemplifying that. All right, so this map is a breakdown of our nationwide ultra-low latency cloud network. So this network is designed and built for backup and disaster recovery. When we talk about backup and disaster recovery, it's important to have your data far enough away from your main site so that it won't be affected by the same natural disaster, but close enough so that it's actually usable when you need to stand up the VMs. So NewCloud, we control the bandwidth and the latency between all of those locations, ensuring that the customer's data is always usable. So if your customer, or if your company, excuse me, is hit by ransomware, this means that we can get your data backups and replicas back to you quickly, which helps to limit or eliminate downtime. We work hand in glove with Veeam to bring our customers best-in-breed solutions. So we have a variety of Veeam offerings that we support, and our engineers are all Veeam certified, and they also implement technology fast. So we offer the full suite of Veeam backup and disaster recovery services. At NewCloud, we believe that great technology is powered by great people. We're always being asked what sets us apart from the likes of Amazon and Microsoft, and our answer is always the same. We believe in personalized service, not a 1-800 number. Our customers can rest assured that we have top engineers available to them 24/7, 365 days a year to help. We know that no two companies are the same, so we don't believe in cookie-cutter cloud solutions. We work closely with our customers to ensure we develop solutions that address their core business needs. And we implement these solutions using best-in-breed technology solutions and are able to provide our solutions at an affordable price. So the bottom line is that we believe in taking care of our customers. I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. I hope you learned a lot about Office 365 backup and why it's so essential to your remote workforce. The most important thing to remember at the end of the day is that it's your data and your responsibility to protect it. Microsoft will not be there to rescue should you face data loss. So what's next? Well, you've heard a lot about NewCloud and Veeam, so we'd love to talk to you about your unique business needs and understand how we can help. Please take a look at the asset that we have available for you here on the webinar, 6 critical reasons for Office 365 backup. It's really an awesome summation of what we discussed here today. And we've also got a free trial available for those of you who are interested in kicking the tires and kind of testing the features of our backup service. And you can always reach out to Michael or myself with any questions you might have after this webinar. And with that, I would like to invite you guys to use the question feature and submit any questions you have for us. All right, we've got one question that came in. How do you back up Microsoft Teams information? Michael, I'll go ahead and let you answer that one.
Yeah, of course. So I hope everybody kind of remembers that little demo that I showed out. When I was picking out the different types of organizations, so you were like, hey, are we Office 365, hybrid, on-prem? The next actually page there is going to be picking out, what services we want to back up. So if you wanted to back up Microsoft Teams, you just go in there, click the box for Microsoft Teams, next, finish, and you would be able to back up your Microsoft Teams workload. So very, very easy. It's just very selective. Just a click of the box, and your Microsoft Office 365 Teams will be backed up.
Perfect. Can Office 365 backup be installed on a virtual machine?
Ooh, good question. So yes, whether it's a virtual machine or physical server, as long as it has at least 4 cores, 8 gigs of RAM, and a decent size, some type of C drive, at least 500 gigs, we'll be able to land on that. We're only going to take about a couple or 500 meg to do that, but having a little bit of a C drive space is definitely going to be worthwhile. But yes, virtual machine or physical server, no worries.
Awesome. Is backup for Office 365 built into Veeam backup and replication?
Ooh, that is a good question. So as of right now, it is not. It is 2 standalone different products. So you have your Veeam backup and replication, which is going to do your infrastructure, VM, physical workload, cloud instances. And then we have the other one, which is O365, going to be backing up Exchange, OneDrive, and Teams.
Awesome. Another one, can I run Veeam backup for Office 365 and Veeam backup and replication on the same server?
Oh, that is a great question. So yes, hypothetically, as long as we're not competing for resources, yes, we can have VBO, so Veeam backup for Office 365, and Veeam backup for replication on the same box, whether that's physical or virtual.
Perfect. Awesome. Looks like next one is for me. How long can I keep my data in storage with NewCloud Networks? Forever, as long as you need. Yep, absolutely. And last question that I see coming through is, how easy is it to restore a OneDrive folder?
Ooh, that is a very good question. So it is honestly just as easy as left click and restore, and then pointing to where you actually want to restore it. So it's just like any other the Explorers I showed out. It's going to be the exact same for OneDrive as well.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, I don't see anything else coming in. So, I'll just say thank you guys so much for attending this webinar alongside Michael and myself. And as I mentioned before, feel free to reach out to us with any questions you have that didn't come up during this webinar, and we're here to help you. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for having me, man.
All right. Thanks, Michael.